Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. I hope all is well as can be in your world right now. I'm honestly feeling all the feels today. The time of this recording, I have just come back from dropping off my littlest boy, my 5-year-old, at his first day of kindergarten. So there's a lot of feelings going on. Some wow, a new chapter, some liberation for me, some excitement for him, some trepidation, about this newness for him and COVID. So I'm feeling the feels. And for any of you who are also feeling emotions, struggling with some hard emotions, I think in general, that's so common in our world. And I think with this sort of resurgence of the pandemic, many of us are feeling even more of those feelings. So I'm sending each and every one of you my well wishes. And, one of the things that's come around so clearly in the US through this pandemic is just so much animosity and so many people with different views and what I would just call a real lack of sensitivity. And that's what I want to talk about today, not the pandemic and animosity, but how our world could really use a revolution of sensitivity, right? Because sensitivity clearly is what the world really needs. And it's certainly what the world needs when it comes to relationships, right? Relationships with everybody, with anyone, but also, of course, in our intimate relationships, right? I mean, if you look at the world, if you look at the state of relationships in our modern world, what's missing is a whole lot of sensitivity. Yeah. And I know I've said this before, but I want to revisit this and go more in depth on this today. So many humans out there aren't being the best of the meaning of sensitivity, right? They're not connected to their compassionate nature. They're not coming from a genuinely caring, kind, supportive, place when they're relating to other groups, other people, and even in their partnerships, right? I look around and see a lack of, right, sympatheticness, empathy, compassion, loving responsiveness from humans, right? What I see more is reactive ways of relating, right? And this is true for both men and women. Now, all of those things I just listed are some of the definitions of sensitive, right? And I want to make really clear once again that I'm not judging all these people and I'm not blaming them. And all of us can get wrapped up in lack of sensitive behavior, right? But so much of it is that we weren't encouraged or taught or modeled such things, right? Compassion, responsiveness instead of reactiveness, right? Empathy, right? All of these things we weren't modeled as a society, or we weren't taught from our culture, right? Really, most of us weren't. And of course, there's exceptions here. But for so many of us, we've been handed down the opposite of sensitivity from our ancestry, right? So it's not our fault, right? And I can't even say it was our parents' fault or the parents before them or like our great, 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 great grandparents. It's been this thing that's just trickled down through the generations, landing us in this time where there is a true lack of sensitivity in our relationships, in our world. But we are, I think so many of us as a collective human species, and especially as sensitive women and women in general, we are hungry for more sensitivity in our world, right? In our marriages, especially, right? These little microcosms of the macrocosm. That's what our marriages are. Yeah. I hear this all the time that the women that I work with are hungry for more, caring and responsiveness and empathy and understanding and tenderness and attentiveness from their partner, right? They're wanting more of that, right? That's all. We could put that all in the umbrella term of sensitivity. Yeah. Because truly, of course we're hungry for this, because truly for life, including our life, to thrive, we require sensitivity. We require nurturing and care and attention. Yeah. And responsiveness instead of reactiveness and compassion and all of this stuff that I keep repeating, right? All of what sensitivity means, life requires it, right? If you think about a little seed that you plant in your garden, it requires a sensitivity, right? Like your attention, your care, your responsiveness to it. Some plants are hardier than others, right? But many of them need like your attention to watering that seed or making sure it has the right kind of light, right? And I would say, as a whole right now, our world is lacking this kind of sensitivity. Even the way we humans are relating to our environment and exploiting our environment. Yeah. And the way we treat other people, like different groups of people, right? So I'm not going to belabor this point. And I want to kind of burrow down into looking, of course, at our intimate relationships, because again, those are microcosms of how humans relate to life in general. And of course, sensitivity is lacking there so often too, right? So I think this all is a true bummer, for lack of a better word. Yeah, like it can be heart-wrenching. Yeah. But it is really important to look at the reality and understand that this is the reality, right? We got to start with where we are. We got to accept the reality as it is, right? Recognizing that truly we weren't taught sensitivity and our husbands weren't necessarily raised to be the kind of sensitive, empathetic person we'd ideally want to have, right? We'd ideally want him to be, right? But accepting that this is the reality for so many of us in this day and age, and instead of wishing it weren't so, right? Instead of spending time wishing it wasn't so, instead of waiting and hoping it will magically change, let's get to work with this reality as it is, right? If we want things to change in our marriages, we ourselves have got to take the initiative, because unfortunately, right, the things we're most wanting won't be handed to us on a silver platter, right? I always was like, I'm the silver platter girl. Please just bring it to me, right? I figured out a long time ago that doesn't actually work, right? Because really, how did you ever get anything you wanted? Occasionally, all of us probably got lucky and did have cool things just happen or show up in our lives, right? But for the most part, when we wanted something, we got to work for it, right? We went to work to get it, to create it. And I think about my son, who is about to get his driver's license. And, just because he wants it doesn't mean he automatically gets it, right? Or I automatically allow him to have it, or the state automatically just gives it to him, right? He has to earn it, right? He has to show up for himself for that dream. He has to work towards it, right? He has to study the rules, practice driving a lot, right? And then eventually pass that test, right? And all of that he also, with all of that, he has to show us, his parents, that he's responsible, right? That he stops. We had a little thing about him going too fast before putting the brakes on when a car is in front, right? He just sort of slams on the brakes. And so I told him he needs to start showing me that he's better at that, so that he can then apply for his test, right? If he's not going to show us he's responsible in the various ways that we're asking him to show us, we're not going to give him this giant privilege of getting his license or being able to borrow our cars, right? So it's work, yes, but it's a huge amount of reward, right? When he really does this, he really gets to earn a huge level of freedom, right? Which is something he's wanting, of course, as a teenage boy. And, it's also, I like to think about the women, some of the changes we've created in society, including having the vote, finally getting to be humans who voted in elections, right? As women back then, we didn't just get to say, oh, I want to have the vote, and then the government, those men, gave it to us, right? That's not how it worked. The women had to do some real work, right? To gain that, privilege, right? Although I personally think it should have just been given, right? It's not ideal, right? That these women had to do this work. It's maybe not how we'd have wanted it to be, but it is the world that we live in, right? So ultimately, my point, what I'm getting at here, is we can work towards what we want, or we can fight the reality of it, right? We can fight the fact that this is how things are, and kind of sit back and wait for things to change. And then undoubtedly, we're going to lose if we do that, right? If we're fighting it and just waiting around. The getting to work to create what we're wanting is where our power is. And the beautiful news is that we sensitive people are perfectly positioned, right, to sort of usher in more sensitivity, this kind of sensitivity that I've been talking about and we're all wanting, so many of us are wanting. We are the leaders of love and relating that the world desperately needs, and our own personal lives need too. And we truly have it in us to bring about what I'm calling this sensitivity, love revolution. We have what it takes to really pave the way for our partners themselves to bring more care and attentiveness and all the things sensitivity means into our marriages, and ultimately to pave the way for humans in general to bring more of this into the world, right? We have what the world lacks in those realms, right? Again, if 80% of the population is not highly sensitive people, and we're the 20%, we are the ones who have it. We have it naturally, right? We have what that 80% lack, and many men, even highly sensitive men, kind of lack because they've been taught to kind of cover over it and kind of hide that. The men just have a whole lot going against them in terms of coming to you fully formed, fully cooked as a great, empathetic, respectful, deeply loving husband. And I've talked about this a little bit in my early episode interview with Casey, revolutionizing men and their feelings, or something like that. And I'm going to go into more depth on this. On men and all of this in a really upcoming episode soon. So look forward to that. But right now, again, my point here is that we sensitive women and sensitive people, but specifically sensitive women, have what's so needed, right? I see us as ones who truly will bring about the world that we sensitive women want to see and truly would ultimately be much happier and at ease in. Yeah? For one, I believe this because we, as highly sensitive women, so deeply value relating in this way, right? In this sensitive, deeply caring way, right? We actually are the vision holders of it, right? We have this vision. I mean, some of you might not have paused and sat down and thought like, well, what is my vision? My crystallized vision of my marriage, like what exactly I want it to be. And I highly recommend doing that. So if you haven't, do that. But I almost guarantee you what you're going to come up with is you want it to be all of these words I've been putting under the umbrella term of more sensitive, more sensitively attuned, deeper, right? Deeply connected, deeply alive and attentive, and all the good stuff, right? So we are the ones who have that vision formed. And I believe that a vision doesn't just land in us for no good reason. It lands in us because it wants to be created, right? And it wants you to create it. It landed in you as a call to step up and create it. Yeah. And of course, once again, we have it in our very nature, this sensitivity, naturally. Right? Specifically, this is the caveat, when we lovingly tend to and honor our sensitivity, we naturally embody this sensitivity. Right? It's not hard work for us. It's natural. Like we naturally have the kind of intelligence that just kind of flows from us when we're centered and honoring our sensitivity, and we've learned how to work with it. We have this kind of intelligence, relational intelligence, that's attentive, caring, subtly attuned, responsive, perceptive, integrating, connecting, loyal, steadfast, like emotional, like colorful, right? Soothing, creative, loving, healing, right? That is you. You naturally bring all of those qualities. Yeah. And so I want to share a little bit more here about as highly sensitive women and what we naturally bring, what naturally comes through us. So, and sometimes these are even the things we've thought of as kind of detriments or negative aspects of sensitivity. They aren't always, right? They're actually when you've learned to work with your sensitivity and really harness it, these are strengths. So your big capacity for feeling, like all the big emotions you feel, they are the antidote to the numbness and even kind of like shutdown that can so often be the kiss of death in an intimate relationship, and certainly is often what's so creating so many of the hardships we're experiencing in our world, this numbness, right? You have these big feelings, so it's the antidote to that, yes? And also that depth of feeling that you have, like this is so beautiful. It's a sustainable source of love in your partnership, right? Like you have so much of that deep in you. So when you access that, really you get to naturally invite your partner along for the ride and truly bringing so much more tenderness and passion right into your life, right into your marriage. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to have this depth of feeling. And even like when you're flooded with overwhelming feelings, right? If you pause and you do the deep processing that's being called for, from those feelings, right? You actually allow yourself to gain access to like these deep insights that will ultimately, I've seen this time and time again in my own marriage, take our love in our relationships and our understanding of each other in our partnerships to a much higher and deeper? Yeah, sure. Level, to a richer place. Yeah. And, we we can have this tendency as highly sensitive people, right, towards what I call flaw sight, right? Seeing the little flaws in ourselves and our partner as problems, right? But like, think about it. This is the kind of sight needed to diagnose areas, to see and reveal areas that need to be healed or developed inside of our own selves or in our partner, right? In order to ultimately best thrive together as a couple, right? I think of this flaw sight almost as like our ability to see flaws, almost as a call to, or a way to kind of guide ourselves towards becoming the most kind of conscious, empowered, loving versions of ourselves, right? Because we see where our work is, we see what's going not so well. So it calls us to step into, the version of ourselves that knows how to, that can navigate relationships with so much grace, ultimately. And I think like I use my flaw sight every day really to help me see where my growth is. And we might actually call this clear sight. I sometimes call it that. But like when we can see what's going wrong, for me, it can help me see where my growth is to become the partner I most want to be with my husband, right? And like that like sharp-sightedness that we sensitives have, it also allows us to, like for me, it helps me kind of know my husband's inner world without a word from him, right? And it allows me to understand what he's going through, whether that's positive or negative or neutral, right? It allows me to really, and then be able to respond really sensitively to him, right? Really lovingly or caringly to him. And another thing that can be problematic, but also can be one of our gifts, is that as highly sensitive people, we can tend towards people pleasing and also like concern about making sure our partners and other people in our lives aren't upset. Like, I want you to see that this is partly rooted in the deep compassion and conscientiousness that you have, and that ultimately we need to survive and thrive as a species. Yeah, it's such an essential like ingredient to thriving in our marriages and as a species on this planet. And one other thing I want to mention that we sensitives have naturally going for us is that we do tend to have this need for quiet and space to be by ourselves, to decompress, right? I think that this is a beautiful example that other humans need in order to kind of put an end to this fast-paced culture that we live in that I believe robs us of actually enjoying our life, right? And ultimately is even robbing the planet of life itself, right? It's exactly what our society needs as an example to slow down, to de-stress, to get more resourced, each of us as a person, so we can ultimately access the creative problem solving we need to thrive in our partnerships and on our planet for generations to come. Yeah. There's so much more that we sensitives naturally bring to our relationships. I highly recommend, if you haven't done so, or if you want a reminder about your amazing gifts and strengths, go listen to episode number 3. So you have so much amazingness going for you. But as highly sensitives, we can't kind of live these out or bring these out super well or like lead love in the ways we naturally do when we're super well within ourselves. We can't live this or lead this when we're kind of drowning in our own emotions, in our own pain, in our own overwhelm, right? We can't get there if we're allowing other people to walk all over us, when we're giving to others at our own expense, right? When we're not respecting and being on our own sides in the most fiercely loving way, right? When we aren't what I call sovereign, when we aren't emotional agents of our own lives, right? Though it's natural, the sensitivity is natural in us, there are so many blocks to it, to living it out naturally. And one of the biggest blocks is simply that we haven't learned how to honor and harness our innate gifts of sensitivity. Yeah. So the question then becomes like, what does bringing all of this natural goodness forward and also getting others like our husband on board, what does that entail? What does bringing about a sensitivity revolution in our marriage entail? I will be sharing many more facets of this over the coming weeks. And I really have been doing so over the last 45 or so episodes, right? This whole podcast ultimately supports this sensitivity love revolution. But for now, just to mention a few things, it involves, of course, leading yourself to being the powerful, skillful, most sovereign, sensitive version of yourself, right? It involves a focus on what you actually can control, which is you and all that goes on within this beautiful, sensitive skin of yours. Yeah. And it will really mean, this is so important, what it will really mean is showing up not just as a nice, sweet, and calm person, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. Although, of course, kindness and love and peacefulness, like all of that goes a really long way and are essential, right? But listen, it also means self-advocacy, right? Having strong boundaries, not being a doormat, not like totally standing up for yourself, right? But what I want you to hear is all of that, like not tolerating mistreatment, all of this, like that's probably going to look pretty different than you might think right now. And you'll see what I mean over the coming episodes where I'll be diving into some really important ways to be your own most loving advocate. So you become someone who doesn't settle for mistreatment and ultimately so you gain the respect you deserve. But you're going to maybe be surprised about how I help people go about that because it's a little different than probably what you've been taught. When I work with clients to really what I've never called before, but I'm going to call right now, like bring about a sensitivity revolution in their marriage, right? Create that marriage that they really want to be having. I take them through a 4-step process that teaches them all of this and how to bring about that. And really, I will do a whole episode on that, and I'll actually put a link to the steps in the show notes for this episode. But what we do together is we develop their sensitive awareness. I teach them to own their power. I help them master emotional agency. And then I show them how to love on purpose. And really, kind of in a nutshell, a lot of what that means is that loving ourselves first and foremost, not abandoning ourselves for love and approval, not allowing for mistreatment is also important, right? And at the same time, we want to be encouraging more and more loving ways of being and relating to your own self, right? Our own selves and to others. And as we as sensitive women grow ourselves in these ways, we are stepping into leading ourselves to love. When you start with you, right, working on you in the ways that I have been teaching you to, and I teach in depth with my one-on-one clients, you become the person who other people, your partner included, naturally treat with so much respect, right? And you are able to show up to your life and your relationships, bringing the gift of your sensitivity full force, right? Which is really the way to truly attain the kind of love and life you desire and deserve, right? It's what will make your marriage amazing, right? So another kind of way of putting this is once we've done our work as sensitive women to develop the best aspects and sort of managing manage the challenging parts of our trait, we really gain access to what we need to naturally have the depth and connection and understanding and love and passion we most want with our partner, right? We develop into the best possible role model for being in a loving relationship. One that I believe that all of us, all humans should aspire towards. Yeah. And really, the more we sensitive women do this, the more we ultimately lead the way for a sea change in the way humans in general do relationships. I truly believe we highly sensitive people can and will revolutionize the way relationships are, right? It will be a revolution of sensitivity. Right? We are the ones to make relationships so much more respectful and caring and supportive and unconditionally loving and safe and trusting and self and other honoring, right? And the cool thing, the amazing thing is that all of this here that I'm talking about is in your hands, your amazing, sensitive, powerful, beautiful hands. And the way that we get started, the way you get started is by taking responsibility for working towards that vision, this vision that we sensitive women have for love and relationship, right? We get started in our own marriages, right? Which again is in the simplest form. It's evolving the way we relate to ourselves and the way we relate to our partner. So this podcast will continue to help you with all of this. And in the coming episodes and weeks, we're going to be diving into more topics that will really help you usher in this sensitive revolution of love in your own marriage and ultimately out into the world. I think it's such an exciting moment for us highly sensitive people. And I'm so happy to be here to support you in this, in creating this in your own marriage and ultimately being a little piece of this sea change of the way we do relationships in our world and the way we relate to non-humans, nature too. So avidly dive into the upcoming episodes, go back and revisit old episodes. And if you're wanting this kind of revolution of love in your own marriage, and you want it to happen soon and with way less trial and error, and you want it to happen way more easily, and you want it to be fun along the journey, I invite you to come coach with me. A client recently told me this in the beginning of our session. All the good stuff is just flowing between us thanks to you. It's such a lovely feeling to be empowered, to be a love leader in your relationship. It feels right emotionally and spiritually. When we women step into this, we have such successful relationships. What we get in return is absolute devotion. What our men really want is to love and adore us. Another client told me recently, I got so much more out of working with you for 6 or 12 months than I did out of years of therapy. Things are really, really good with my partner, better than ever. He says the sweetest things about being so grateful to be with me and how we can turn around a bad moment so well. We've been showing each other so much love and tenderness, and things just feel so much easier and lighter. I am filled with gratitude for you. Now, these kinds of things that I hear so often from my clients they're so heartwarming. And I feel so lucky to be able to be doing this work. But truly, it is these women themselves who are creating this for themselves, and it's rippling out into their lives. And it really took them initiating and deciding to show up first and foremost for themselves by scheduling a consult call and then deciding to do this one-on-one coaching with me. You can be saying the same kinds of things. You can be having the same kinds of experiences. All you have to do is start with applying for a consult call, and then we'll decide together if coaching is the right fit for you. I will put the link to schedule that call in the show notes. All right, my beautiful, sensitive friend. The time is ripe The world is ready. Your marriage is ready to be filled with so much more sensitivity, and you are the one to bring it. So tune in next time where we're going to talk about how to not be a doormat in your marriage, in your relationship. Until then, be oh so